if you hear some tweeting, that's because I think there's a bird in my attic. So just try to ignore that, tune it out if you hear it, but appropriate because we're talking about the city of nightbirds. So I don't know, maybe the bird intuited that this would happen. All right, so the author of this, another great book. I don't know, I don't pick the books for the Buzz panel. The team at Buzz Books, Michael Cater, et cetera, do. And they just do such a good job of culling through the many, many riches that we have access to. So, another kudos for picking City of Nightbirds. So the author, Juhea Kim, is the author of the novel Beasts of a Little Land, which I vividly remember and loved, and is a finalist for the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. She's a graduate of Princeton. Her writing has been published in Granta, Times Literary Supplement, and Guernica, and other places. Born in South Korea and raised in Portland, Oregon, Kim now lives in London. So Helen Atsma, her editor, is vice president and publisher of Echo. Previously, she was editorial director at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. So as with all the other books we've talked about tonight, as I said before, the writing is just... but what I hope Helen, her editor, will extract from Juhea is why a writer born in South Korea, raised in Portland, Oregon, would be drawn to the Russian ballet world. Did she have dreams of becoming a ballerina herself? Is she a dancer, perhaps? Was it Tolstoy who sparked her interest in Russia? And did Black Swan influence her at all? We're waiting to find out. And now, Juhea and Helen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Leigh. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to be here and to be here with Juhea. And I just want to give Sarah Birmingham a shout out. Sarah actually edited this book that I have the privilege of publishing in my role as publisher at Echo. But I want to know all these things too. This amazing novel, it's captured all of our hearts at Echo and really across so many people at HarperCollins. It follows a once famous ballerina, Natalia, and she returns to St. Petersburg 2 years after a devastating accident. It stalled her career. She's been deeply troubled, and now she has to decide if she can face the stage again and the pivotal people from her past in this extremely cutthroat but also beautiful world. Juhea, the way you write about dancing, the art and the passion and the physicality of it, I mean, it just comes off the page, and I have to believe it comes from personal experience. Can you tell us more about your history, your personal history with dance and ballet? And I'm wondering if there was a real-life ballerina that you had in your mind as you were writing this book.
I started ballet at age 9, and I did pre-professional summer intensive in high school. I continued to study ballet at university. And I remember one of the most memorable courses I took at Princeton was modern choreography and dance. And at that time, I was 21 going on 22, of course, going through a lot of personal growth and had a lot to say. So this solo piece that I choreographed for the final project, I really threw myself into it. And there was a part where I thought of a gesture or movement, and I knew that it was either gonna land or people were not going to have that reaction. And when I actually performed it at the end of the year, there was a moment where everyone gasped in the audience. And while performing, I knew that what I had intended had worked. So that was the first time in my life when I felt the thrill and understood the impact that I could have as a storyteller even before I became a writer. And I returned to ballet as an adult during the pandemic. And while writing this book, I was dancing 5 or 6 days a week, 1.5 hours to 2 hours at a time, in addition to watching videos, going to performances, and reading up as much as I can about it. So it was an incredibly intoxicating experience.
Oh, I love that. And I think you were spending your pandemic days doing more interesting things than many of us. So it's amazing then that it got funneled into this book. Echo had the privilege of publishing your first novel, which Leigh mentioned, Beasts of a Little Land, also a novel I love. It was also you were on the Buzz panel for that as well. And I'm curious because that novel is set in early 20th century Korea. It spans 50 years. And City of Nightbirds, it does reach into the past. There's certainly a feeling of history here, but the novel's contemporary through line takes place in 2019. So I'm wondering, just in terms of process, was the writing and the research like a lot different for this? Did you have to like really shift gears, writing something contemporary versus something that was purely historical, or was it kind of a seamless transition?
So the short answer is no, the process was exactly the same. And I will explain via a recent trip I made to Florence. I was just in Florence last week. And of course, I saw the statue David and other Michelangelo works. And Michelangelo, of course, is well known for saying that the statue already exists within the block of marble, and all he has to do is remove pieces around it. And I really relate to that because, I know that there are other creative processes and other writers revel in the research process, and they find pieces of information that they didn't know before. They knit it together into a story that they didn't know about, sort of like working with plaster. And for me, it's rather the opposite. I always start with the message that I want to say. What are some lessons about life I've learned? What is the truth to which I want to bear witness? And this is very important to identify early on, because novel writing, it costs you a lot of life force and lifespan. And you want to make sure that what you choose to say is meaningful and worthy of that price. And once you identify that message, for me, the story shapes itself relatively quickly. So of course I read books, I watched videos, and learned about the histories and cultures of these theaters and places. And Michelangelo, of course, also studied the antique sculptures, and he actually studied the human anatomy obsessively. But I think for him, and as well as for me, the research really is secondary to the message and that inspiration that comes as a whole.
Well, that makes me think. Also, it leads me to a question. This book is set in Russia in 2019, the bulk of it, and it investigates how current affairs can seep into the world of art and artists and dancers in this case. And I think it definitely speaks to Russia's role in the political crises of the past century up to that point. Can you tell us more about that setting and your familiarity with it, and how you thought about addressing those issues in this book?
I began drafting City of Nightbirds in spring 2021 with the idea of writing a pure Künstlerroman, a pure making of an artist novel. And as you know, my debut novel, Beasts of a Little Land, is intensely political. It's a book about colonialism, it's a fight for independence, the division into North and South Korea. And just on a personal level, I wanted the satisfaction of trying something completely different. And in the middle of drafting it in February 2022, when Russia invaded mainland Ukraine, not addressing this in any sort of direct way no longer became an option for me. And of course, in order to do that, I had to think about the reactions of the characters, the Russian and Ukrainian dancer characters that inhabit this novel. But I also had to think about where this book fits into contemporary American publishing industry. Publishing industry, as well as society at large right now, are lacking in subtlety. I think there's a lot of posturing and performative advocacy in the form of eliminating others. And I think avoiding Russian characters or Russian subjects, such as Russian art, ballet, that not only completely misses the duty and the purpose of art, which is to create a bridge through humanity, but it also very specifically ignores the fact that some of the fiercest fighters for human rights and freedom of speech and dissidents against autocracy and dictatorship have been Russian artists. I think that there are more authors, novelists, and poets who have been against Soviet regime and have been punished for it than those who went along with it. I mean, all the greats, Solzhenitsyn, Akhmatova, Pasternak, everybody who influenced through their spirit my writing of this book. And, the relationship between Soviet ballet dancers and the regime, it's a little bit more complicated. There were defectors. I think that they were a little bit more apolitical than writers, to be honest. But even people like Maya Pliskaya, who refused to defect because she loved Russia, her direct family members went to the Gulag. So I think I really wanted to do justice to all the ideas that I had, and I'm really happy that I was able to address it in a way that felt authentic to me and my vision.
I'm having a connection issue. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Juhea? Okay, all right. I also wanted to talk a little bit about dance and ballet. I will confess I have seen, The Nutcracker and a few others. I am not ballet obsessed, although I really deeply admire it as an art form. And yet this book spoke to me so deeply and so passionately, I think in part because this is a novel that's exploring the mind of an artist, the drive to create and pursue perfection, and the relationship an artist has with her work. And in a different way, this is something I brush up obviously every day in my work as a publisher, my work with writers. And I found your insight into that psychology so beautiful and haunting. And I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share about that.
Well, of course, some of what any author writes is based on experience and the rest is from imagination, but I based a lot of that psychology behind art making upon my own experience as a writer. The drafting of City of Nightbirds began just before the publication of Beasts of a Little Land, and it lasted through the first 1.5 years post my debut novel publication. Now, I gave everything I had as an artist and a person up until my early 30s to my debut novel. And I was incredibly frightened of rushing into my sophomore novel without the requisite growth, without enough experience and sacrifices needed for that message that I spoke of earlier, and disappointing my readers with something that's not real. And fortunately, so much happened during those 1.5 years through the publishing of my first novel that this time period really transformed me, and I learned a lot, to be honest. And so I had something totally new to pour into City of Nightbirds in a relatively short amount of time, which made the writing of it honestly so natural and effortless most of the time.
I'm still having a little bit of problems hearing you, but I can sense you're hearing me, but we have to wrap this up anyway. I thank you so much, Juhea, and thank you, Leigh. I hope everyone takes the time to read this incredible book. It'll transport you to a world that I know, again, has just moved everyone here who has read it.
Well, it's so interesting to think about an artist who's a ballet dancer and an artist who's a writer, and the physicality, the difference in physicality. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, did you read Maggie Shipstead's book, Astonish Me?
Yes, I did. I believe that came out from Knopf when I was an editorial assistant there.
Oh, wow.
About a decade ago, yes.
Anyway, but about the physicality.
I have to say, Leigh, I know you earlier asked if I was inspired by Black Swan, and it is not a favorite film. I'm sorry if that's a polarizing opinion, but that was not one of the sources of inspiration.
Good to know. That's probably good. I love your book. So thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh. This has been a wonderful night. So thank you very much. And congratulations.